The time is almost here. Let's talk about some breakout running backs to target in this year's 2024-2025 fantasy football season. Let's kick it off with Zamir White. I think White is on a lot of people's radars this year, and rightfully so. Josh Jacobs left in free agency and signed with the Green Bay Packers, and there's a huge void to be filled. Jacobs leaves behind around 21 touches per game, and I think White has the first crack at filling in that void. White's already proven that he's capable of handling a full workload. From weeks 15 through 18 last year, he was the RB9, averaging around 15 points per game, and I think that's a pretty safe expectation in terms of floor for this year. Antonio Pierce is an old school coach. They're going to try to win games with defense and killing the clock through the run game. They got to play the Broncos twice, the Chargers twice, and the Chiefs twice. And I don't see them lighting up the scoreboard through the air. I mean, they have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell at the helm right now, so they're going to have to rely on the run game in my mind. The Raiders did bring in Alexander Mattison, but I think Mattison proved last year that he's not a starting caliber back in this league. He's more of a complimentary guy. And even though he may steal some touches from White, I think White is very clearly going to be the lead dog, at least to start the year. Currently, White's being drafted as the RB22 around the 7th round, and I would actually be a little bit more aggressive than that. I think he has a lot of upside here. He should get all the cracks at the goal line, and I think if anything, if he can prove to catch the ball a little bit better, he may have even more upside, especially in PPR. As it stands, he's probably a better pick in standard leagues, but I think he's a great choice in either. Next up, Zach Moss. Moss started off hot last year, and that's largely because Jonathan Taylor was out of the lineup due to a contract dispute and also an injury. But from weeks 2 through 6, Moss was the RB3 in PPR, averaging nearly 21 points per game. And he finished the year as the RB31, which is really impressive to me given that he missed 4 games, and in 3 other games that he did play, he was pretty much playing a secondary role. So I think now with Joe Mixon out of town, Moss should have a good chance to take a hold of the #1 job. I do know that the Bengals still have Chase Brown, who kind of came on towards the end of the year last year, but I think he still has some room to grow. I think Moss is the guy to own in this backfield. He's currently being drafted as the RB25, but I would be a little bit more aggressive with him too. He has a lot of upside. He's definitely proven to handle a full workload. He can catch the ball. He can run it in between the tackles. And I think he's someone to target, especially if you're going after receivers in the earlier rounds. The Bengals also boast the 6th easiest schedule, which only helps his cause. I think they're going to try to have a more balanced attack this year. The Bengals lost Tyler Boyd in free agency, and we've kind of seen over the past few years that T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and even Joe Burrow have all been kind of injury prone. And a big way to mitigate that is to run the ball. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them lean into the run game a little bit more this year. Next up, let's go over to Tennessee. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Tennessee, but if you look at this roster, it's pretty impressive. They brought in Tyler Boyd, they brought in Calvin Ridley, they signed Tony Pollard, and they have a new coach in Brian Callahan. And I think Callahan is going to change how this team operates. There are definitely questions at the quarterback position, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Callahan shake things up. Over the past few years, we've all gotten accustomed to the Derrick Henry show. He's averaged around 33 touches per game over the last 2 years, but he is no longer there. He signed with Baltimore, and there's a huge void to be filled. And I know a lot of people think that Pollard's going to step right in and absorb most of that work, but I would pump the brakes a little bit. Spears proved that he's efficient and plenty capable. He finished his rookie season last year with nearly 840 total yards. He was really good in the passing game, and he was also averaging around 4.5 yards per tote. I think he's going to have an expanded role this year, and Tony Pollard may be the guy that comes out of the gate as the starter, but we saw last year that he was pretty inefficient as a starter, and he definitely missed Zeke. I think he thrives better as a complementary back, or at least when he's sharing carries with someone, so I could see this being a split backfield. Now, I do think they're going to focus on the passing game given how dynamic their receiving core is, but since there's so many questions at quarterback, I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to take some pressure off their young guys and just run the ball a bit more. Currently, Spears is going off the board around the 9th round as the RB32, and I would be more aggressive than that. I would even take him in the 7th round, especially in PPR. Now, I do want to mention the Titans pretty much have the worst O-line in the league, so bake that into your decision, but if you're looking to take a chance on someone, especially in PPR with some solid upside, I would heavily consider Spears. Next, let's head over to Steel Town and talk about Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren was the RB22 from weeks 15 through 18, and while it seems like Najee Harris is still the nominal starter, he's going to be splitting time pretty equally with Warren. Last year, Warren had around 210 touches, and Najee Harris had around 284. So it was a lot closer than most people think, and I think that's going to be the formula again this year. The Steelers no longer have Deontay Johnson. George Pickens is their #1 receiver. They still have Pat Freiermuth, who is definitely a bit injury prone at this stage of his career, and they signed Van Jefferson, who really won't pose much of a threat in my opinion. I think Mike Tomlin and company are going to try to go back to old school Steeler football, run the ball heavily, control the clock, and win games on defense. They brought in Justin Fields and they brought in Russell Wilson, and I think they're going to do what they can to mitigate turnovers and just take pressure off of both of those guys, whoever the starter ends up being. Currently, Warren's going around the 7th, 8th round, and Harris is going about 20 spots earlier, but I wouldn't spend that capital on Harris. I would wait for Warren, or even draft Warren a little bit earlier than that if you can. I think Warren has a lot more upside in PPR. He had around 61 catches last year, which is very solid, and he has room to grow. He's definitely one of my favorite players to break out. Next, let's talk about Brian Robinson. Robinson had a great year last year, and what a great story given what happened to him a couple of years ago. He finished the year as the RB21 despite missing 2 games, and I think he has a lot of room to grow this year. I know a lot of people are worried about the team signing Austin Eckler, and I think Eckler will be the nominal starter, but Eckler's 29, Robinson's 25, and I think Robinson has proven that he is very capable of being a lead guy in a backfield. The Commanders have the 13th easiest schedule this year, and with Dan Quinn taking over at the helm, it wouldn't surprise me to see them go back to old school football, especially with the rookie quarterback in Jane Daniels. They're going to try to take the ball out of his hands, take pressure off of him, and just give the ball to their running backs. Yes, they still have Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, but this running game is going to be their focal point in my opinion. Currently, Robinson is going in the 9th round as the RB33, and I think that is far too low. I think people are getting scared off because of the Eckler signing, but I would be more aggressive here. I would take him as early as the 6th or 7th round, especially if you're going receiver heavy in the beginning. These last couple of guys I feel like are value breakouts, but definitely people to consider. First, I want to talk about Devin Singletary. The Giants have a huge void to fill with Saquon Barkley signing with the Eagles. And I think Brian Daboll brought in Singletary due to their days in Buffalo, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him be the #1 guy right out of the gates. Singletary definitely started off the year a bit sluggish last year, but I think that's because the Texans wanted to see what they had in Dameon Pierce. And towards the end of the year, Singletary really came on. From weeks 14 through 18, he was the RB15 in PPR. The Giants do have a somewhat difficult schedule, but like I mentioned, those 21 touches Saquon left behind have to go to someone, and he seems like the most logical fit. As it is, he's being drafted around the 8th round as the RB32, and again, I would be a little bit more aggressive here, especially if you're looking to target someone that can help you as the year goes on. I don't think the Giants are sold on Daniel Jones, and they're going to continue to rely heavily on the running game. Lastly, I want to talk about Ty Chandler. Chandler's an interesting one. He really didn't get much of an opportunity until the end of the year last year, but from weeks 15 through 18, he was the RB18 in PPR. And I know the Vikings signed Aaron Jones, but Aaron Jones at this stage of his career has proven to be a bit injury prone. He missed most of last year with a hamstring injury, and I know he really came on during the playoffs, but you can't really bank on him being able to stay healthy for an entire season. And I think Chandler is obviously an elite handcuff, but he should have some standalone value as well. And I say this especially because of their questions at quarterback. They either have to go with Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy. And in my mind, neither of them are very strong options, so I have to think that Kevin O'Connell is going to lean into the run game more than he has in previous years. Up until now, they've pretty much been a pass-dominant team. I think over the last 2 years, they've either finished with the 3rd or 4th most pass attempts in the league, but with Kirk Cousins out of the picture, that's surely going to change. This division is definitely one of the more interesting ones. I think it's Detroit's to lose, but obviously Green Bay was ascending. You got to think about the Bears revamping and getting Caleb Williams. And the Vikings are still obviously pretty prevalent. As long as you have Justin Jefferson on your team, you have a chance. Not to mention they still have Jordan Addison and Hawkinson. So it's going to be interesting to see how this team works out. They do have the 5th hardest schedule in the league, which complicates things a bit, but I would definitely keep him in the back of your mind, especially in the later rounds. He's currently going off the board around the 12th round as the RB45, but again, I would be a little bit more aggressive here. I think he has good standalone value and is an elite handcuff to Jones. Those are some breakout candidates to keep in mind when drafting for your 2024-2025 fantasy football drafts. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and let me know your thoughts on who you think is going to break out in the comments below.